To our conversation with Shellye Archambeau. We're so excited to have her today to share more about her career journey, how she's integrated her personal life with her professional life, and also to share some exciting details about her new book that will be launching, I think, on October 6th, called Unapologetically Ambitious. So in case you haven't joined one of our past events before, we're Wharton Alumnae Founders and Funders Association. We're an alumni group that's associated with the University of Pennsylvania that has a mission to connect more women founders with funders and hear more about the journeys of reputable people who have graduated from our school. So with that, I'd like to share some details on our upcoming events. We have quite a few lined up. Let me just pull it up. So, can you see my screen? On September 23rd, we're speaking with Ida Ekbodom and Davida Herzl on When a Moment Sparks a Movement. On September 24th, we have Creating a Business You Love with author Elaine Pofelt. And then in October, we have another event on Contracting and Financing with Stan Holloway and Katie Billick. In addition to that, we also have some details here that I'll leave up on the screen about Shellye's new book, but I'll hand it off to Shannon now, who will do introductions for Shellye as well.
Yeah, thank you, Shilpa. And thanks for the update there. And then, yes, the number listed here, Shellye, is this still the best number where folks can, at least locally, call to order books?
Absolutely. And it's actually, as I look at it, it's actually Books Inc., INC. But it's right in Mountain View on Castro. And if you call that number, as long as you order, it does nothing special, just place your order before the 15th. Then yes.
And they're signed copies, right?
Those are, yes, they'll get a signed copy.
Awesome. So everyone, that's where to get your signed book copy. Follow instructions. But yeah, for those who didn't, I think most people got a great overview of, or have a sense of who you are and your background from the event details that we sent out. But you're a Wharton woman, one of tech's first Black female CEOs. You're on the board of some incredible companies. I happened to meet you back in January when people would actually go to live conferences and we wouldn't do the Zoom thing. And you were actually speaking on your experience and how you got onto corporate and startup, or onto corporate boards, not even startup boards. We just bypassed that altogether. And I was just, like many, so impressed by your story, by your grit, by your tenacity. We stayed in touch. You know, you wrote this book recently, Unapologetically Ambitious, that comes out October 6th. And it's really, and so first of all, here's my book. I've never read a pre-ordered or a book that before it came out on the market, which is very exciting. It was very exciting, especially in a pandemic. And it was phenomenal. And I thought it was a great, it was very tangible. And I liked all the practical use applications that you went through, that you dove into in this. So just starting this off today, what I'd love to get your sense of is, even like the title of the book and this word ambitious, how do you define it? Because it's oftentimes a word that has negative connotations, especially when it's associated with women. Like if you say she's ambitious, it's not necessarily seen as a good thing. And I think that's something we need to overcome. So I'd love to first just start off by defining the word ambition and as you see it.
Yeah, absolutely. And first of all, thanks for having me and inviting me to participate. And this question in particular is one that's close to my heart. As a matter of fact, I'm in the process right now of writing an article for Forbes on the whole ambitious versus aggressive and, you know, all those kinds of things. So what does ambition and ambitious mean to me? Honestly, it just means someone who is striving to make an impact, right? And I think someone who's ambitious sets goals and targets so they can achieve things. So I actually see ambition as something that's not just for people who are in the business world. You know, people think of ambitious people and it's people who want to strive to the next level and next job and next role, whether it's business or it's government. But frankly, you can be ambitious and not even have a job outside of the home if you're still trying to impact things. There are plenty of people who are ambitious, who are driving and making a huge difference, whether it's with nonprofits or with schools or whatever. It's all about your personal drive to make an impact at whatever level you are targeting to make that impact at. So I think most people have some ambition in them. There are definitely people that are more ambitious than others, but frankly, everyone has the right to be ambitious. Studies show that people who are ambitious and actually act on it actually rise faster within the business world. They actually tend to perform at higher levels, and oh, by the way, they happen to be happier, even if they haven't achieved all the goals they set out for themselves. So doesn't that sound like something we all should be able to do?
Where did this word get such a negative connotation? What happened there?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's all about societal, in my opinion, societal expectations, right? So societal expectations are people are considered to be the ones to perform certain roles. And for way too long, if we talk about women, women we're supposed to be the supporters. That was just kind of the view. And so as a result, when you step out of that supporting role and go into the leading role, it like breaks with expectations. And that's when you have challenges. People of color, same thing. We're the supporting roles. If you look at what you see, whether it's in the media, television, et cetera, it tends to be the roles that are supporting something else. We're not the ones that are actually shown.
Did you make that shift going from, or do you ever feel like you were in a more of a supporting role and then shifting into a leadership role? I mean, obviously in the leadership role now, but what was that shift like for you?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my style of leadership has always been a servant leader approach. So I've always focused on the team around me, whether they're direct reports or they're just people in my extended team, and helping others to be successful, because I honestly believed if I could help my team be successful, then I would be successful by default. And so given that kind of approach, I never really looked at it as I'm going from a supporter to a leader. I always felt they went hand in hand as a role. I couldn't be a good leader if I wasn't actually a good supporter.
I like that. I find that, yeah, I can argue with that one. So going back to sorry, that was a little, I don't usually get off topic that early, but I just want to dive in a little more of what you shared.
I am happy to talk about anything. So please, people who are listening, put your questions in. I am so open and candid. I always say I'll answer any question. And if there's one that's asked that I don't want to answer, I'll tell you. That's never happened.
I like it. Okay. So a big part about this book is about resilience and how being told no can be a good thing. So can you just unpack that for us a little bit? What do you mean by that?
Absolutely. So it's interesting to me, but so many people have a fear, right? An internal, like, oh my goodness, I'm afraid to ask, right? Or I'm afraid to take action or whatever it might be. And I don't really understand it, because if you ask and you get a no, you ask for a raise, you ask for a new job, you ask for support, whatever it might be, right? You ask for something, either for yourself or on behalf of the team. And if the answer is no, that's actually great. Why is that great? It's great because number one, you asked, and now you have an opportunity to ask the key question, which is, why not?
Yeah.
And in asking the why not, you learn. You learn if you're trying to get promoted and the answer is no, fine, why not? Now you learn what are the skills you don't have or the experiences you haven't demonstrated or whatever it might be. You know what that gives you? An action list. That's now very specific and it's identified that you can go act on, right?
Yeah.
No, you can't have help for your project. Why not? And then you understand, well, this project actually isn't the priority. Well, I want to be working on something that is actually a priority, right? It's important to know those things so that you can position yourself better going forward. So always ask. And those are great, much better than avoiding the question and then never finding out.
It's true. Well, along those lines too, you said you're a big planner. And I thought that a big piece of this book was talking about the planning and not just like dreams are great, having like and putting out like big audacious goals are equally as great, but also having the plan to back that up and to actually make those dreams a reality. And I think that to me was actually something that just really resonated in this book was the practical use applications of that. So walk us through, like, what does your planning process look like for you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, first I set goals. You pick a goal and you set a goal. And the difference between a goal and a dream, because a lot of people say, oh, they have dreams, and dreams are wonderful. but you need to turn a dream ultimately into a goal. And a goal has a timeline and a plan. So once I have a goal, I'll make it real simple because we could talk about Wharton. You know, I decided, I'm one of those crazy people, I actually decided in high school.
This was part of the book where I just cringed. I was like,
what can I tell you? I decided in high school. That
only school for those, just real quick, like Shellye applied to one school, and that was Penn. And fortunately for all of our sakes, she got in and got in early, but
yeah.
It was one school.
It's true. It's true because I knew I wanted to be a CEO. So I said, okay, if I want to be a CEO, then I looked up and I knew the odds are not in my favor. There's no one who looks like me running anything that I could find. There's no internet back then. So it's just what you read, right? And then I said, all right, fine. So I need the best credential and the best education I can possibly get. So Wharton, I said, all right, I want to go to Wharton. And that's the only school I want to go to. So that's now part of my plan. I'm going to go to Wharton. And then I'll go to Wharton and then I'll figure out the right industry to join. You know, I need to be an industry that's growing because they have the most opportunities. So I picked tech. You know, all of these things were lined up. But yeah, I did. I wrote to Wharton and basically after I finished the app at the very bottom, I said, you're the only school I'm applying to. It's the only place I want to go. Please take me. Now, good news is I'm a good student. But yeah, that's exactly right because it was part of my plan. So
I would love to see a copy of that admissions letter. That's
so anyway, so when you think about it, right, it's the goal. I asked myself for this goal, I want to be CEO. So what has to be true? And I go do the research to figure out what has to be true. What's the path that CEOs took, right? What's their backgrounds? What jobs did they start in? What I do as much research as I can. And back then it was a whole lot harder than it is now, by the way. And then I put a plan in place to make it true, right? That is real simple. What has to be true? Fine. Now put a plan in place to actually go make it true and then execute on it. And here's the key, because a lot of people set goals and some people actually put a plan in place. But the real power is in making decisions every day that are consistent with your plan. So that, and what that means is you have to assume that your plan is going to unfold. And so if it is, make decisions now, assuming that it is, so that when it does, you're actually ready to take advantage, right, of the actions and steps, etc.
So what did you do to celebrate getting in?
Say that again?
How did you celebrate getting in?
Oh, how did I celebrate? Gosh, I don't remember. It was, I do know. The first thing I did, in my family, we have this crazy thing when good news happens, you gather and dance around the kitchen. So I danced around the kitchen.
Nice. I have a quick follow-up question to that, if you don't mind, Shannon.
Yeah,
Sure.
So you mentioned dream big, set a plan, and work every day towards that as if it's already going to happen. In that case, how have you dealt with, if you have dealt with, imposter syndrome when trying to achieve those lofty goals that you've set for yourself?
Oh, gosh. So first of all, let me just tell you, it's not a past tense. I still have imposter syndrome. All the things that I've done, and I still have imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome is something that you just live with, right? I think very few people actually get completely over. Now, first of all, it's important to know that you're actually in good company if you experience it, because research shows just about everybody, men, women, everybody experiences imposter syndrome at one point or another. Now, it happens to be more likely and more common for women. And oh, by the way, if you're a woman of color, we experience it the most. Yeah. All right. So number one, it's not you. This imposter syndrome thing you're feeling, why does it happen? It happens because the world tells us every day in so many ways how we are not quite, and you fill in the blank. You're not quite smart enough, you're not quite technical enough, you're not quite assertive enough, you're not quite whatever, tall enough, pretty enough, young enough. I mean, you fill in the blank. So we are constantly feel judged. And then is it a surprise that we actually then have some self-doubt? Okay, so first thing to know is everybody has it. It's not you, it's kind of the world. So don't take it personally. Second is when people open the door, when they actually offer you a job, invite you into a task force, right? Make you part of the room. And you're thinking, oh my God, right? Do they really know that I don't know anything? You have all those feelings. Well, believe them. They're actually doing it because they believe that you can do it. So believe them. And if you can't believe them, then fake it. Fake it until you make it. Honestly, I've done that throughout my whole career. Even walking into the Verizon board meeting, right? I've been a CEO for over a decade. I've served on public boards. I've got all those things I've done. I walk into that board meeting and I'm just like, oh my God, right? The stomach. I'm like, here's the CEO of Aetna, CEO of CVS, right? The CEO, and here's me. So what did I do? Put my shoulders back, put my head up. I said, all right, today I'm walking in and I'm a Verizon board director and I'm going to be cool, calm, and collected. And eventually I'm going to know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And that's what happens. So we all feel it. Don't let it stop you. Just figure out your own way. And I talk about lots of different ways to approach it in the book because I had it all the way through. But figure out your own way to address it, but don't let it stop you.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. A little bit of echoing here, don't I? Well, actually, building on that though, you tell a story in the book on a time when you were just transferred to, you were working with IBM and you were just transferred to Japan. And can you tell the story that you share in the book about, not to give everything away, but I don't feel like it just really solidifies that notion of what you were saying, how that actually worked to your benefit when you were.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to picture this. This is the 90s. And I am, man, I don't even remember. I'm 36, 37 years old. I'm something in that range. And here I am. I have just gotten a job to be vice president and general manager for the over in Asia Pacific. Now, I happen to be the first Black female that got an international assignment in IBM, which is ridiculous that it took so long. But as I'm heading over, my boss that I'm leaving says to me, Shellye, there are 3 things that are really important in business to be successful in Japan. And I'm like, okay, great, right? I'm gonna get the insight. And he says, number 1 is wisdom. That's age. You don't have it. Like, okay. Number 2, listening. It's being male. All right, I am 0 for 2. And I'm thinking, this is my send-off speech. He says, 3rd is intelligence, and you better figure out how to maximize it. I'm like, thank you. So anyway, so I head over to Japan. And honestly, what I learned was that I was actually real successful very quickly. And despite the fact that I did not fit in, right? I mean, you don't see me because I'm not standing in front of you, but I stand, bare feet, 5'10" or so. The average Japanese male is probably about 5'6", 5'7". So I'm towering over everybody, right? I'm female, I'm young, I'm Black. I mean, but I spent my entire career to date knowing and learning how to be successful as a minority in business. And so when I went to Japan, I was able to use those exact same skills because I was a minority over in Japan too. Whereas a lot of my colleagues had never had the experience of being minority. They don't realize that every time you walk in a room, whatever you've done really doesn't come with you. You have to prove yourself every time, that people are going to assume that you're not quite, capable, that you're somehow, given something, et cetera. You have all these things. And so you learn how to handle it, how to address it, and how to work through it. Well, colleagues didn't have that. And so I tell women and people of color all the time, go after international assignments. You have more skills than you realize to be successful in a foreign country, in a foreign business environment, just because of the fact that you know what it's like and have adapted successfully to being a minority in business.
Wow. No, it's really good. I'm going to ask some questions. Shilpa? Or can you guys hear me? I feel like there's an echo on this.
I'm hearing you fine.
Oh, it's fine?
Yep.
Okay, just on my
Yep.
computer? Okay, great. Well, along those lines, around with you obviously made the choice to go over to Japan. And a big part of your book too was on making choices, not sacrifices. And I think this is actually one of the biggest learnings out of the book for me personally was even the reframing of that. So I would love for you to, and I noticed it so much more. I heard even Michelle Obama the other day say we make sacrifices, and I wanted to Michelle, no, but but you know, but it's small and it's semantics, but unpack that a bit. Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I actually think the words we choose are really important.
Yeah.
So yes, that's why I spent time talking about making choices, making trade-offs, not sacrifices. I did not make sacrifices. What's a sacrifice? To me, a sacrifice is when you do something for the full benefit or for somebody else, right? You do it for them, not for you. Well, when you make sacrifices where you're doing something it's not for you and it's for someone else, you know, over time, you feel put upon because you did all this for somebody else. And whether you are getting, you know, the support, you know, or the thank you or the whatever it is, right? You feel like you're being used and suddenly you've lost your power.
Yep.
No. Every decision you make, you are actually making the decision. You can choose. You can absolutely choose to do something for someone else, but it's your choice. Nobody made you. So keep your power. Make choices, make trade-offs, but don't make sacrifices.
Yeah. That's, no, I love the way you said that. What were some of, like, in terms of the choices that you made and how you prioritize, like one thing that you prioritize that I remember in the book that resonated too was, you know, for childcare. Like, I'm not going to drive a fancy car. I'm going to live, we're going to live in the best neighborhood we can, but I'm going to have a nanny at home, like a live-in nanny. And so can you just, like, what was that process like when you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So we said already that I'm a planner. Okay. So, you know, I planned all of it. So when my husband and I, you know, we're going to get married, and I won't even go back all that far because there's a lot there. But anyway, read the book. There's a lot there. But I'm going to jump to the point where my husband and I we're planning to get married. All right, fine. We're planning to get married. I'd like to have children right away. I always wanted children young, so I wanted to have children right away. I'm joining IBM, and IBM has training back then. And training was like 12 to 18 months, where literally you worked in your office, you flew to training, right? You went back and forth and back and forth. Well, if I want children right away, I'm not going to be able to fly in my last trimester. And I didn't want to slow down any part of my career, right? Just because I'm pregnant. So I said, all right, I told my husband, well, we need to move to Dallas. We're in Philadelphia because I'm at Wharton and he's in Philly. I said, we need to move to Dallas because Dallas is where training is. And that way, if I live in Dallas and I can do training in Dallas, I can drive. I don't have to fly. So he found a job in Dallas and that's where I started. But then it was like, okay, as we're putting together our household budget, you know, we want to buy a place, we want to do this, that, and the other. The first thing on the budget, the first line item before food, before housing, before car, before anything was childcare. That was the first line item because I wanted a nanny. And I was willing to make whatever trade-offs we had to make to have a nanny. And got my husband agreed. So we said, great, nanny, first line item. Then we looked at how much money we had left. And that's what we were able to spend on the place where we lived, on our cars. So we had used car. I mean, a lot of people come out of school. It's like, yes, I'm a real person. They get their first new car. They do this, they do this. That was not my priority. So you can do what you need to do if you're willing to make the trade-offs and the choices. I wanted financial flexibility so that we could have this nanny.
No, I think that reframing it like that just makes it feel much more empowering than disempowered, like you do when you make a sacrifice. Mm-hmm. I think, anyway, thanks for building on that and clarifying that. Another piece in the book you wrote about, and I'm actually gonna just read and quote this here, but because I loved it so much and I think it applies to a number of things that Wharton can do today, and the power of a group, even like this WAFFA group that has grown to mushroom to 2,000 people in the past year. But you say universities, corporations, government agencies, these institutions are organized power. There is so much potential held in their hierarchies, flowing through the ranks. If you can find your way in the door of a great institution, you can be part of things that are much bigger than what you as an individual could ever achieve. That's what I've always wanted out of life, to impact things that were bigger than me. So to that end, what advice would you give Erica James today, who just stepped in as Wharton's first Black female dean? What would you say to her about how to use this moment to really impact the school, the university, the surrounding neighborhoods? I think One of the things that I loved about Judith Rodin when she came into, one of the first things she did when she became president was like, she transformed West Philadelphia. She cleaned it up. She like completely turned that place around, and it made it safer for students, which, was always like a big question mark. And so yeah, what advice would you give to Erica James along the same line today?
Yeah, my biggest advice for her is to realize the power that she has and to use it. So set her priorities. And I'm not going to tell her what I think her priorities should be, because I don't know the institution nearly as well as she will. But she should choose her priorities, both in terms of inside the school itself, but also the impact that the school and her role can play in the broader narrative of the community. So pick priorities and then go after them. Put plans in place, get people engaged, and go after them, because she has a lot of power. And because she happens to be the first Black woman in that role, she also has visibility, which can be helpful in bringing attention in the spotlight to be able to focus on problems and challenges. So I hope she will use her power.
I couldn't agree more. But what advice would you give to her on like getting, and this is assuming this would be a priority, and I hope that it would be, but what advice would you give her on getting more women and minorities involved with Wharton and just creating a path from the school into the real world, upon graduation, both for undergrad and grad schools and in the business school? Sure.
Well, in terms of, to me, it's all about partnerships. It's working hard to understand, what do businesses want from their graduates? And then do the assessment to make sure, are we actually creating the experiences and the knowledge that these companies are looking for, right? So that's one, just check and make sure. And if not, make some changes, et cetera. And then partner with companies so that there is an easy relationship and way for people to both have access, right? Have exposure, as well as apply for those kinds of roles. But I find that the universities that do the best jobs are ones that actually create not transaction opportunities. Transaction opportunities are career fairs, right? That is a transaction opportunity.
Right.
What you really want is something that's much more strategic. Some companies partner with universities, and what they do say, okay, every year we're going to take X number of your graduates, period, right? They just do it. And we can look at things like that and then partner with different schools. I mean, Wharton has so much power, capability, breadth to it that that most companies would love to have a strategic relationship with the organization.
Yeah, agreed. And then last question before we'll hand it over actually a little bit early, because I already see questions popping up and I want to make sure that the audience gets, we answer audience questions. So you're on some incredible Fortune 500 boards that we've briefly talked about, Verizon, Nordstrom's, et cetera. What did this path look like for you, and how did you make it your way onto these boards?
Yeah, well, first of all, be candid. Even though I decided, I want to be CEO, as a teenager, I didn't even really understand what a board member was until, gosh, I was in my 30s. It was probably in my early to mid 30s when I really realized that, oh, wait a minute. I knew there were boards of directors, but I just didn't understand what they actually did. I didn't see it as a job. All of those things. But when I realized, oh, wait, the CEO reports to the board and the board is the one that hires and fires the CEO, I'm like, okay, after I become CEO, I want to serve on public boards. So that then got added to the goal list, right? And so what did I do? Well, first of all, in my 30s, I was like, because I'm a planner, I said, all right, so let me understand this. And just like I did with the CEO, who serves on boards? What are their backgrounds? What do boards look for? I did all, I call it homework. Homework doesn't stop when you leave Penn or leave Wharton. I do homework all the time. I still do homework to this day. It's just doing the research and the work to get prepared, right? So I did my homework and I said, all right, what kind of skills do boards look for? What's the experience they look for? So I pulled all that stuff together and said, okay, fine. Based upon this, I want to be a CEO anyway. That's the good news, because the CEO is a key piece here. Technology tends to be an area that companies like. So I was looking at all these elements and I said, fine, once I get my CEO role, I am going to try to get on my first public board as soon as I can, because the number one requirement that most boards had for new board directors is board experience. So I said, gosh, all right, that's a catch-22. Now, it's not that every board member has experience that gets on a board, but that's what they always look for. So I said, fine, I want to develop a long-term board experience so that by the time that I'm ready to move into, I call it phase 2, then I'll have the experience. And now I can choose which boards I sit on. And that's what I did. So I became CEO at 40, and I got my first public board seat at 42. And I treated it just like finding a job, same way. Do the research, what are they looking for? Crafted both the resume and the bio, and then talked to everyone that was related to a board. So recruiters, people who serve on boards, accountants, lawyers, because they're in the boardrooms. I told everyone who was in and around a board that I knew, I told that I am interested in serving on a board. Here are the 3 skills that I bring that I think are most valuable, blah, 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 blah. And, we made it happen. I also spent a lot of time talking to people who were board members to understand, okay, how to behave, what do I learn, what do you look for, what you don't. So you do all that kind of research to get yourself prepared. And then you go after it.
Awesome. We have some interesting conversations on Nordstrom's board at the moment.
Oh yes. COVID's definitely have an impact. You never expect to have to close every single one of your stores for any period of time. That was not in the risk assessment.
That was not in the board job description. Pandemic. Okay, Shellye, do you want to? I know you had like 1 or 2 questions, and then we can bring it over to the audience.
Yeah, sure. So I also had the opportunity to read your book. I really enjoyed it. I'm curious, for the folks that haven't had the opportunity to read it, what is one thing you hope they'll take away as they're going through it?
That they can improve their odds to get whatever they want out of life, professionally and personally, if they're intentional about what they do and the steps they take. It's probably the number one thing.
Very powerful. So with that, we have a ton of questions from our audience. Feel free to keep putting them into the Q&A box below. One of the first questions that we have is, in your experience, if you could go back in time, is there anything you would have done differently, personally or professionally?
I'm going to give 2 answers to this, because the general answer is no, but let me explain why, because that sounds like, wait, you did everything perfectly? And the answer is no. I had hardships and tragedies and made mistakes and the whole bit, but I believe that everything I did led to the next step, which led to the next step. And I like where I am right now. I like my life right now. All the tragedies, all the pain, all those things that happened. If that's what I had to get through to be where I am, then I would go through it again. Now, that said, so that's the general answer. Let me share something that I would have done sooner. And that is making sure people know what I do. When people ask you what you do, most people respond with a title. What do you do? Oh, I'm the director of operations for XYZ company. Okay, but you know what? You haven't told them a thing. Director of operations for XYZ company, that could be anything, right, that you're responsible for. And even if it was a title that might be a known title, companies define jobs differently, right? And even within a company, director of ops in one division versus another division could be completely different. So don't waste an opportunity and just give people a title when they ask you what you do. Tell them, I'm the director of ops. I'm responsible for all of the customer implementations globally and drive the blah, 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 right? Now, why is it important to do that? Now they actually know the skill sets that you have, not your title. So they may actually think about you when they have a special project, a new job, all because it's like, oh, you need somebody who's got experience doing global you know what, Shellye does that. Versus they're not going to think of Shellye if all they heard from Shellye is director of ops. All right. So when people ask you what you do, tell them in 30 seconds, not 5 minutes, right? But just have a quick response that you practice. And by the way, practice, practice, practice. I practice. that you practice. So when people ask you, it comes off quick, it's succinct, and it covers the key points.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway. Another question that we have is, what is one professional risk that you took that you learned the most from?
Oh my goodness, that's easy. Taking the MetricSystem job. So, and actually it wasn't even MetricSystem when I took it. So people I'm sure at different ages on this call, so let me just give you a little background. The year is 2002, and the dot-com bubble had burst in 2001, which was like, I'm sure you were around for the 2008-2009 financial crisis. That's what it was like in tech. So gosh, I don't even, half the businesses probably went out of business. It was really just devastating to the Valley. And as a result, a lot of people lost their jobs, including CEOs. Well, I'm now ready to go after my CEO job. It's on my timeline. I've done what I said I was going to do. I'm pushing 40. I'm like, now's the time to go after my CEO job. But I mean, the odds, were they in my favor? Heck no. I'm competing against people who have been CEOs, right? Because they're all out there littered around. So I said, you know what? I'm not going to get an A-Play. An A-Play is a company where the investors and everybody thinks it's going to be successful. That'll go to known entities. So I'm going to go after a problem child, but a problem child for a top-tier venture firm with a top-tier VC partner. That way, even if it doesn't work, I've at least established a reputation and relationship with a top-tier firm and a top-tier partner. So that's how I mitigated the risk. But let me tell you, this company was called Zaplet. It had raised $100 million in like 1991, right, during the height of all this stuff. When I got there, it had like less than 10. And they didn't have a whole lot to show for it. Revenues, I don't even know if revenues were over $1 million. And by the way, expenses were more than that a quarter. Okay, so this company is like going out of business. They hadn't sold anything new and I mean, just all of it. So you sit there and say, risk? Huge, huge risk. But I also felt that if I could turn this thing around, it could also be great rewards. So I jumped in and took the risk, because risk and reward are two sides of the exact same coin. If you want opportunities, if you want to indeed get high rewards, you've got to take risks. Key is to mitigate them, like I did. Now, the good news is, the great team, a lot of hard work, some major steps, we did turn around. Today, MetricSystem is a global leader in governance, risk, and compliance. Customers all over the world, over 1,000 employees. It's doing great.
That's awesome. Was the venture partner Ben Horowitz who did the forward?
Actually, no. The venture partner was Vinod Khosla when he was at Kleiner Perkins.
That's right. Okay. Yeah, backstory there. It made me think of Jara, one of the other Wharton women that we work with, who's president of WAFFA. Her company is incubated at Coastal Ventures.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
Right, Ms. Vinod. Sorry, keep going.
Yeah. So the next question is from Sherry Fang. What do you think was the most important habit that you've developed to become a better leader?
Courage. Courage is absolutely the number one. And courage, by the way, is a muscle. Nobody's born with courage. As a matter of fact, Mother Nature on purpose, right? We are actually, from the time we come out of the womb, we are afraid because that's how we protect ourselves. So courage is not something people are born with, something you have to develop. And if you work on it, you can. So I was not born courageous. But I will tell you, it's something that I absolutely worked on and developed, and it's definitely one of my superpowers today. Why is that important? Because it's courage that allows you to do the right thing when everything around you is telling you not to do the right thing, right? Courage is speaking up when it's hard to speak up because of the pressure of the, who knows, embarrassment of whatever it might be. Courage is what allows you to lead people through major challenges and major storms. So courage is so, so important. And I will tell you, I think it is so lacking. It is just so lacking. And you see it every day. People don't have the courage to do what is right. What they know should happen, they don't have the courage to stand up for it. So courage is my answer.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially in times like this.
Yeah, absolutely. We all need it. So how do you stay motivated on achieving your goals, especially when you feel like you're plateauing or you feel like there's a certain setback against you?
Mm. You know, I think it's probably where a bit of the ambition plays a factor, and also um, pride. So so when I say that, let me tell you what I mean. When I have goals, I tell people. Now, is that risky? Am I vulnerable when I do that? The answer is absolutely. And, and I do it for everything. So when I wanted to be CEO, especially as I was getting close, people knew I wanted to be CEO. But I do it for everything. I'll give you an example. Exercise. All right. To keep my exercises and my workout routines interesting, I would set a goal for myself at the beginning of each year, something that I couldn't do at the beginning of the year that I'd say I'd be able to do at the end of the year. They were things like a one-arm push-up, right? Or X number of pull-ups, or balancing and doing squats on a ball with weight, and whatever it was. It was something physical that I couldn't do. And then I would tell people. Now, why did I tell people? Because that's the way they hold me accountable. When I don't want to get up in the morning, or when I don't want to push myself, or when I'm like, well, I don't want December to come around and people say, Shellye, how'd you do with the goal? And I say, oh, I failed. I know. So, if you can't get the motivation internally, then get it from others. Tell people what you're trying to do, and then let them hold you accountable. If you're plateauing, do something about it. Don't just sit there, right? One of the things that I think is so important is you need to feel uncomfortable. If you have felt totally comfortable for like 3-4 months solid, then you are not pushing yourself. And I don't care if that's at work, at home, with your hobbies, I don't care what it is. But if you are totally comfortable, you got this, you're comfortable, then you are not pushing yourself. So you need to get yourself uncomfortable. And getting uncomfortable means doing something you don't know how to do. It means pushing yourself, right, to step into a situation that you haven't handled before. It is stepping forward, right? That's where courage comes in. But you got to get yourself uncomfortable, because otherwise you're not learning. When you are comfortable, you are learning Zippo.
Sure.
True.
I love what you said about sharing your goals too, because I always, one person that's always resonated with me as well is Ray Dalio. And he says, one of the things he says is when you're setting goals, not only tell people, but tell all the smartest people you know so that they can give you feedback on those goals. And you can like stress test those opinions on them to see if like, okay, is this something like, is this reasonable? Is this, so it goes both ways. It's both like, getting them as your allies and your advocates, but also getting feedback on the goals you're setting.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. So you serve on the board of quite a few notable companies: Verizon, Nordstrom, Okta, Roper Technologies. What has been the most challenging part of being on those boards, and what has been the most rewarding?
Oh gosh. Okay, so most challenging. Most challenging is when you go through, and honestly, I would tell you COVID has been the most challenging, because every single company got impacted in some way all at the same time. And therefore, I serve on 4 public boards. And what I used to say is, yes, I can handle 4, because it's rare that more than one has like a problem phase at a time. And a problem phase is suddenly when you have extra calls, you've got extra work, you've got extra, right? It becomes very intense. Well, boom, COVID hits, and all 4 of them, I mean, literally for about a 6-week period, every day I was on a board call or a board meeting or a board, I mean, it was crazy, right? So COVID, dealing with major, unexpected situations is probably the most challenging in terms of being on a board. With regards to the most rewarding is honestly, it's the impact. I'm all about impact. This whole phase for me is all about impact and inspiration. And sitting on a board, you can absolutely have impact, especially if you have courage. So if you look at my boards, just, simple things. Not only are my boards really diverse, and oh, by the way, most didn't look that way when I got there. But I'm on all those 4 public boards. I've got, gosh, it's at least 2 African Americans, if not 3, on every board. There is at least 30%, if not 50% women on every board. So I've totally impacted that. I've made nominating governance my specialty. So I strive to get on the NomGov committee, and I actually chair it now for 2 of my companies. Because NomGov sets the overall what the board looks like. It also sets the governance of how we operate and what we do. So it's a powerful committee. And then helping the company do better, whether it has to do with strategy, how it approaches customers, its go to market, the areas in my lane become more technology astute, right, and driven. So it's the impact.
Yeah. Absolutely. So in your book, you talk about taking a more non-traditional path after Wharton, and how you specifically chose a role at IBM. So I'd love if you could, if you don't mind sharing a little bit more about that, because one of the questions we just got from Kunji is, if you just graduated today with a business degree, what would you do and what industries would you look into joining?
Yeah, so, all right. So first of all, I will talk about that. So when I'm coming out of Wharton, all of my friends are going off to be investment bankers, international finance people, P&G product managers, all those things. This is before startups, so nobody was going to Silicon Valley. But what I would tell you is, I went into sales. And everybody was like, what? What? Right? Here you come out of Wharton and you're going to go sell computers? And the answer was yes. And the reason I did it was not because I loved sales, but because I wanted to get into technology industry. And I decided IBM was the company because it was the Apple and Google of its day. And every single CEO at IBM started out in sales. So I decided, okay, that must be the path to power. And so I started out in sales, despite the fact that people thought I was absolutely nuts. And obviously it worked out. Honestly, I think everybody needs a job in sales, because it was in my sales job that I learned that getting a no was a good thing, and that I could use that across my career forever. It was in sales that I learned how to get over problems and issues, that I learned that everything's not personal. I learned so much in sales that helped me to be a better leader, manager, professional, all the way through. So the person who's coming back to me and say, what job would you take? I still think sales is the right first job. And it doesn't have to be selling computers. But I do think doing a sales job at some point is important, whether it's your first job or you do it summer or between, I don't care. But anyway, so that's my plug on sales. With regards to industry, if you're ambitious, pick industries that are growing. Industries that are growing have companies in them that are growing. Pick those companies, because they don't have enough resource. They never do. And as a result, they tend to develop and move people up faster because they've got to scale and grow. If you pick industries that are stagnant, you're going to move slower because they just don't have the same accelerated need that growing companies have.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned how board composition has changed at the companies that you serve on their boards for. How do you personally connect with Black, Indigenous, people of color talent to diversify boards?
Oh, well, first of all, I've been very passionate about helping to diversify boards now for over 10 years. So I'm actually I tend to be a bit of a go-to person. So a lot of people call me, whether people are interested in board or people are becoming boards, whatever. So, I have a good network. So that definitely helps. And I'm engaged and know about a number of organizations that represent all types, right, of people. And matter of fact, I was just on CNBC this morning talking about this very topic. But because there's a new thing called the Board Challenge that was just launched today, and I'm part of that. And it's all about companies signing up to commit that they will have at least one Black board member on their board. If you look at it in the Russell 3000, 4.1% of board members are Black, right? Just abysmal numbers. So there's focus and there's intentionality on that. But it's not just Black. It's important that we have diversity across the spectrum. And that's something, as I said, I'm definitely focused on and I absolutely support.
Yeah, love that. Those are all the questions that we had for, oh, actually, there's more in our chat box. This one's a really good one considering your book. What advice do you have for working mothers who are striving to advance their careers while balancing personal obligations, your spouse, children, etc.?
Okay, so now you hit on a little hot note with me. I detest the term balance, all right? And let me explain why. I think this whole notion of work-life balance was created to make us all feel perpetually guilty. Because what is a balance? A balance is a static thing, right? It's a bar with two things hanging on it and it's even at all times. Life does not work that way. Life does this. There's no way that you're holding something balanced, and to judge ourselves against that is ridiculous. Remember I talked about how much we get judged and why we have imposter syndrome? It's like, no wonder. But let me answer the question. I believe in work-life integration. I have my personal priorities and I've got my business priorities, but I am one person. And those things come together and then I prioritize them collectively. Now, when you prioritize, and here's the key, you've got to let stuff go. You've got to let stuff go that you no longer hold yourself accountable for, that you no longer measure yourself against. You have to let go. So how do you do that? You prioritize, you get help, whatever kind of help you need. And to me, again, it's back to your priorities and planning. So if you need help, get it. I'll give you a perfect example. I tell people this all the time. My daughter actually did it. Only a few people that I've told have ever did it. But I say, listen, the witching hour, if you are a working family, is between the time you get home, then call that 6 o'clock, and now we're all home, but go back to the old days. So call that 6 o'clock until about 8 or 8:30. Those are the witching hours. Why is that the witching hour? Because everything happens in that 2-hour block. You've got to feed people. You've got to plan for the next day. You've got to get lunches together. There's homework that has to get done. There's your own work stuff that you want to make sure. Baths have to happen. I mean, pick it. And then all the things that are going on around the house have to go happen in those same 2 hours. Hire somebody for 2 hours. All right, it's not going to break the bank. Trade off eating out at a nice restaurant for hiring somebody to come 2 hours a day. And even if it's just 3 days a week. And then what do you have them do? Whatever you don't want to do. If you don't want to cook, they cook. If you don't want to bathe the kids, let them bathe the kids. I don't care what they do. But give yourself some relief during the witching hours. So this is really all about priorities and putting your resources, which is both your dollars and your time, against your priorities. So that would be my highlight. But there's lots of examples of things that I did in the book.
Yeah, definitely. And then this will be our last question, but what are your thoughts on developing expertise in a single functional area versus getting experience in multiple functions? We often hear that CEOs and C-suite execs need to have experience across multiple spaces. And as you rise, it seems difficult to get that breadth.
Yes, right. So you almost gave me the answer to my question in your question, because my first question was going to be, it all depends on what you want to do. So if what you want to do is to become a C-suite executive, then the best way to improve your odds is to broaden. Have some depth, have areas in which you specialize, but broaden your experience. Because yes, if I'm hiring somebody, even if it's a chief marketing officer or a head of product or whatever, people who have actually have the skill set but have done other things, I prefer. And the reason I prefer is because now they've walked in somebody else's shoes. So they're better able to understand not just the function, but the needs and requirements of their customers, right? Or the broader organization. They can wear the hat of the company, which is what I expect from senior executives, versus the hat of their division. So if you're trying to get there, then I would say build a strength, but absolutely broaden. But if you're not trying to get there and you really are just trying to become known as the expert in X, then no, you don't need to broaden. So it all depends upon what your goal is, which is why that's where you have to start. Set the goal. What needs to be true to achieve it? Put a plan in place to go make that happen, and then execute that plan with help.
Cool. Thank you so much, Shellye, for taking time to answer all these questions. Hear feedback too. With that, I'll pass it off to Shannon to think and close every.
Can I just say one more thing before I go?
Please.
Okay, so first of all, thank you again. I so appreciate the questions. That's my favorite part of all this. Feel free to connect with me. Just mention WAFFA. Don't just do a blind connect because I won't know who you are, but mention WAFFA and I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. Follow me. I share a lot of advice. I post and put stuff out almost every day. I've got blogs. I do an Ask Me Anything session on YouTube once a month where anybody can sign in and just ask me what they want and I address it. So I try very, very hard to share and to help others achieve what they want to achieve. So let me help you and connect. All right.
I'll say that Shellye after the Watermark conference, she gave me the same advice. So that's actually how she's good to her word. Oh. Do we have some screen sharing happening? Oh.
Yeah, just sharing the screen in case they wanted to order the book.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
All right, and thanks, and I appreciate the help and the support for the book. Thanks, Shannon.
Yes, of course. Thank you both. Thank you, Shellye. And okay, you want to keep this up here? We have a few minutes left. There was one question that came on here, and I don't know. Do you have time for one more question? So 4 minutes.
Yes, I do.
Are you, and just timely, it says, are you involved in politics, opinion, or position on upcoming presidential election?
Oh gosh, so am I involved in politics?
I went there.
That's okay. I am definitely a voter. I take that very, very seriously. My view of politics is we spend 90% of our bandwidth focused on the national scene, when the local scene, our local state senators, our local mayors, they impact 90% of our lives, and we pay no attention to it. So I'll use this moment just to say, yes, president and all that is definitely important, but honestly, it is your state senators, your state representatives, it is your mayors that actually impact your daily lives. Your local taxes, your roads, your school funding, everything that happens in your day-to-day life is actually affected locally. So let's start paying attention at the state and local level.
Now it feels like a very good time to do that too, doesn't it? All right.
Yep.
Well, thank you again. Thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, if folks have questions or want to order the book, we have information both in the chat box and/or feel free to reach out to WAFFA directly and we can get that to you. All right. Well, thanks again.
All right. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.